Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in a woman's life when she gets tired, not just physically, but emotionally, tired of waiting, tired of explaining, tired of hoping that effort will finally be enough. And in that quiet, defining moment, she stops running after anyone and starts running toward herself. What begins as surrender doesn't end in weakness. It becomes her greatest strength. Today, I want to talk about that shift. That moment when her silence speaks louder than her words ever did, when her stillness holds more power than her pleas, when her peace finally, beautifully, becomes her power. She showed up not just in the way people post about on social media, but in the quiet, unglamorous ways that actually matter. She asked how his day was, not because she was bored, but because she genuinely cared. She remembered the little things, his coffee order, his stressful meetings, the way he preferred silence when he was overwhelmed. She offered emotional shelter without asking for credit. She was his calm in the chaos, and yet somehow it all started to feel expected. That's what happens, isn't it? When someone becomes a constant in your life, you stop seeing the effort behind their presence. You forget that showing up day in, day out is a choice, and she made that choice for him every single day. Without drama, without needing applause, she just gave time, gave grace, gave energy, gave love. But in his mind, her consistency began to blur into background noise, not because she changed, but because he stopped noticing. He started believing that love should come in waves, not in rhythm, that the highs were proof of depth, that the passion should be dramatic. He craved what was fleeting, forgetting that the truest form of love often arrives in silence, in structure, in stillness. He wanted fire, but overlooked the warmth that kept him alive. She didn't come with ultimatums. She didn't make scenes. She didn't threaten to leave when things got tough. She stayed, and because she stayed, he assumed she always would. He didn't see that her staying wasn't a sign of weakness, it was her strength. He didn't realize that her patience wasn't passivity, it was resilience. She wasn't trying to be unshakable, she was just trying to love him the way he deserved. But the truth is, love like that only feels ordinary when you've never had to live without it. The first time he snapped at her and she forgave him, he told himself it was no big deal. When he forgot something important and she smiled through the disappointment, he told himself she was easygoing. When he started making her feel like a second thought and she still made him dinner, still asked if he was okay, still believed in him, he didn't feel grateful, he felt entitled. He didn't recognize the quiet sacrifice. The emotional labor, the silent swallowing of her needs to protect his peace. He called her low maintenance, but really, she just loved him enough to not make everything about herself, and still he didn't see her. Until she was gone, until the consistency he mistook for ordinary was no longer there to lean on, until he sat in the stillness she once filled and felt the weight of it all, the things she did that he never noticed. The time she gave without being asked, the way she knew when to give him space and when to pull him closer, the love that was never loud, but always loud enough to make him feel safe. Now he looks back and realizes that what he once called boring was actually the deepest form of loyalty. That the woman who didn't always challenge him wasn't weak, she was wise enough to choose peace over pride. That the woman who didn't leave during the hard times wasn't dependent, she was deeply committed. And now he craves that consistency, not because he finally understands what it meant, but because he's seen what life looks like without it. He's seen what it feels like to search for someone who won't flinch when he's at his worst. To miss a love that never tried to impress him, but tried to understand him. To miss the woman who never asked him to be perfect, just present. But she's not there anymore, because even the strongest hearts grow tired. Even the most giving souls run dry. Even the ones who always stay eventually realize that consistency without appreciation turns into quiet heartbreak, and she had already stayed too long. When she was there, she didn't take up space with noise. She didn't demand attention with drama or chaos. She didn't force love through grand gestures or ultimatums. She simply existed with grace, offering the kind of presence that made everything feel softer, safer. She was the steady hand on his shoulder when life shook him. She was the calm voice that grounded him when his world got loud. Her presence was subtle, but it was everywhere, woven into his routine, his peace, his sense of being understood. And then she was gone, not in the way people imagine. No yelling, no door slamming, no revenge. She didn't leave with fire. She left with clarity, quietly, like a candle running out of wick, like the air changing before a storm. At first, he barely noticed. That's the irony. Her love had always been so gentle, so consistent, that he'd gotten used to its warmth like background heat in a room. He didn't know how much he relied on it until it stopped radiating. He went about his day. The silence didn't scream at first, it whispered. It whispered when he reached for his phone and saw no message. It whispered when something funny happened and she wasn't the first person he wanted to tell. It whispered in the space where her laugh used to echo, in the way his apartment felt bigger without her things, but colder too. Slowly, those whispers grew louder. He noticed it when no one asked how he really felt. When no one remembered the things that used to make him anxious, when no one made his coffee just right or remembered his random thoughts from 2 weeks ago, her absence started showing up in conversations that felt forced. In company that felt like noise, in new faces that didn't feel like home. He thought he'd enjoy the freedom, the quiet, the lack of pressure, but he quickly learned that her presence had never been pressure, it had been comfort. The kind of comfort that held him up when he didn't realize he was sinking, the kind of comfort that never needed to be loud to be powerful. He had mistaken her emotional intelligence for simplicity, her empathy for softness, her attentiveness for routine. Now there was no one reminding him to call his mother, no one double, checking if he had eaten, no one noticing the way his energy dropped after a phone call or the way he avoided eye contact when something was bothering him. The absence of that kind of presence isn't loud, but it's felt deeply. It's felt when he stands in the kitchen and realizes there's no second cup anymore, when he gets home and there's no welcome back smile, when he feels low and realizes there's no one to see through the "I'm fine." Her absence was a mirror. It reflected everything he'd taken for granted. He had gotten so used to being emotionally held that he forgot what it felt like to be emotionally alone. And now he's surrounded by people, but none of them touch his soul the way she did. They respond, but they don't understand. They show up, but they don't stay. They listen, but they don't hear. He didn't lose her in one moment. He lost her slowly, through the conversations he didn't have, the appreciation he didn't give, the presence he didn't value. And now he feels her gone in every silent space she used to fill, not just physically, but emotionally. Her absence shows up in the way his world has lost a certain softness, a certain rhythm, a sense of being known. It's not that life has stopped, it's that life feels dull, like color has faded, like laughter doesn't rise as high. And now he's left chasing a feeling he can't recreate, not because she was perfect, but because her love was real, because her presence had depth, because the version of himself that she brought out, the one that felt seen, loved, and safe, doesn't show up anymore. She's not there to witness his change, not there to see his regret, not there to hear the apologies he rehearses in the quiet of the night. And that's when it truly hits him. Her absence was never empty. It's full of everything he didn't say, everything he didn't do, everything she was, until she wasn't. There was a time when her love was loud, not in the way that made noise, but in the way that tried. She reached for him when he pulled away. She fought for the connection even when she was the only one holding the thread. She stayed up waiting for clarity that never came, sent messages that went unanswered, and gave chances that weren't earned. Her love wasn't passive, it was active, effortful, always extending itself beyond comfort just to keep them together. She cried in silence, she swallowed disappointments, she carried the relationship on tired shoulders while convincing herself it was mutual. But peace wasn't something she had, because love for her had become a battlefield. A place where she was constantly trying to prove her worth to someone who stopped noticing the weight she was carrying. And then slowly something shifted. She stopped trying to change him. She stopped replaying every conversation, stopped chasing closure in places where clarity didn't want to live. She stopped showing up where she wasn't met halfway. She didn't yell, she didn't beg, she just let go, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation, not because she stopped loving him, but because she finally started loving herself more. That's when peace entered. Quietly, like it always does, not with declarations, but with decisions. Her peace came when she chose silence over chasing, when she chose boundaries over broken promises. When she realized that love doesn't have to hurt to be real, and that if she kept confusing chaos with passion, she'd never know calm, and as she embraced that calm, something inside her woke up. She began smiling without waiting for a reason. She started sleeping through the night, not because things were perfect, but because she was no longer holding pieces that weren't hers to fix. She began to glow, not the glow that comes from validation, but the kind that comes from restoration. She wasn't performing anymore, she wasn't proving, she was just being, and that being was powerful because for the first time her energy wasn't tied to someone else's unpredictability. She wasn't spinning in circles trying to decode mixed signals. She wasn't writing stories in her head to excuse someone else's emotional absence. She was grounded, still, whole. He noticed, of course, he did. He noticed the way she stopped reacting, the way she no longer asked where things were going or if he still cared. He noticed the silence and how it was more deafening than any argument she'd ever started. He noticed the space she created and how no one else filled it the way she once did. He noticed the peace and realized it wasn't just the absence of drama. It was the presence of someone who no longer needed chaos to feel connected. That peace was magnetic. She started walking differently, shoulders back, eyes forward. She spoke with softness, but carried a strength that couldn't be shaken. She didn't need to defend her choices. She didn't need to prove her healing. She just lived it, and in doing so, she showed a version of herself that he had never truly seen, because he was too busy trying to keep her small. Now she doesn't flinch when his name comes up. She doesn't check his feed. She doesn't wonder if he's changed or if he regrets it, not because she doesn't care, but because her peace has built a life where those questions no longer matter. Peace gave her power because it reminded her of who she was before she dimmed herself to be loved by someone else. It reminded her that her softness was never weakness, that her patience was never permission, that her love was always enough. He just wasn't ready to receive it, and in this peace she isn't just healing, she's becoming the woman who no longer begs to be chosen, the woman who doesn't chase what confuses her, the woman who doesn't trade her worth for temporary attention. Her peace is quiet, but it speaks volumes, and in that stillness she's found a kind of strength he never gave her because she finally gave it to herself. The most powerful version of her was never the one that chased, begged, or explained. It was the version that chose herself, the version that didn't need revenge, didn't need to be loud, didn't need to be seen by the one who refused to see her. because real growth doesn't announce itself. It just shows up in the way she protects her peace, in the way she no longer reacts, in the way she builds a life that no longer depends on being chosen by someone else. And if you ever see her again glowing, laughing, unbothered, know this: it wasn't someone else who saved her. It wasn't time that healed her. It was her. Her peace wasn't given to her. She earned it, and now that she has it, she won't give it away again. Thank you.